They both have rivalries on the schedule that gain a lot more attention, but this has become one of the most heated series in college football. It's Stanford at USC this week, and it should be a heck of a football game. And I can't think of a better way to discuss it, preview, and predict this thing than to bring in Donald King from Last Word on College Football and Nick Dempsey from Saturdays at Nick's and also Conquest Chronicles. Guys, this is like Pac-12 breakdown all over again. This is good stuff. I love this.
Indeed.
Happy to be back.
62-7, Don. We talked about it right after the final seconds went off the clock. We couldn't gather a whole lot from that one, but Bryce Love and company looked rather sharp on offense.
Yeah, they look surprisingly good. If they're able to manage the jet lag, back from Australia, which I suspect Shaw and the staff worked overtime on getting them right during that first week so we could have a good week of prep this week. Stanford looked great. All the things you were looking for, they didn't get a whole lot of resistance from Rice, but the things you were looking to see, we saw, which was highly encouraging, particularly given that debacle in Evanston 2 years ago. It's very, you can never take anything for granted. I'll put it like that.
USC wrestling with Western Michigan until about halfway through the fourth quarter. So the Trojans got a bit of a scare there at the Coliseum, Nick. And it's certainly a game that we talked about a number of times in terms of P.J. Fleck being absent, but his top-ranked MAC recruiting classes for 3 consecutive years not being absent, and they put up a pretty good fight.
Yeah, I think you have to say it was a little bit more than a kind of a scare from Western Michigan. They really did well. They ran the football very well. A lot of the concerns we had going in showed up in a huge way against Western Michigan. The receivers, once again, did fail to live up to the standards they need to in order to move the passing game along. New concerns, though, was the tackling from the front seven. That was a huge concern. Now, part of that was the first week of the season. Part of that was the heat was pretty ridiculous. And part of that was missing Cam Smith in the first half. But a huge concern going in now is that Western Michigan's running back, pretty good. Bryce Love, probably a lot better. And so they got the win, and that's always good. But now I think there's a lot of apprehension moving forward as they step up in the competition from Western Michigan up to Stanford.
Okay, guys, probably the best thing I could do in serving my audience and even for my own enjoyment is just to kick back and listen to you guys pepper each other with thoughts and information on this one. So, Don, you get started, and Nick, you go at it, and I'm just going to kick back and have some fun.
Yeah, I'm going to make the Trojan faithful feel a little better right now. In no way do I expect the USC team that showed up to play Western Michigan to be the same USC team that shows up to play Stanford this coming Saturday. Yeah, same venue, but it's going to be a completely different team. I thought the Trojans looked disinterested in that game. You could chalk it up to week one. You could chalk it up to, these just some, mid-major group from somewhere in a flyover state that we don't really care about. Or their coach left, or, they're not going to be as good as they were a year ago. Or you could even suggest that they were looking past them, to a conference game against a hated in-state rival that actually matters. And any of those things could be true. But you can trust that this USC team is gonna show up breathing fire, snorting nails on Saturday night, and they're going to be ready to play. This is not going to be a walkover or that sloppy kind of SC team, and frankly, even the not so sharp Sam Darnold that we saw last weekend ain't going to be the same thing that Stanford gets to deal with this coming Saturday night. They're going to be fired up and ready to play, and that's if the coaching staff doesn't do a single thing to get them ready.
Well, first off, let me just say I hope they're not actually snorting nails. That sounds painful.
It does.
But I think you're right. I think they're going to come out much more fired up. You could tell the post-game interviews with the defense after that Western Michigan game, they were not good, and they knew it. And they made that very clear. They knew that they had to get better. The problem is, though, is that, man, Bryce Love does not need a lot of space.
Nope.
to turn what a normal running back could do 4 to 6 yards on, which is good. He can turn that to 10, 15 plus pretty quickly. And I don't know if David Shaw will ever feel bad about getting 10 yards a run. I think he'll take that all day. I can't imagine anyone wouldn't. So they're going to have to step up. But there is a huge concern with the wide receivers because right now, Sam Darnold did not look as sharp. That is true. But it was pretty apparent when you go back and look at the tape that he didn't. After a while, it was pretty clear he didn't really trust a lot of his guys to make the catches.
Yeah, fair enough.
So he kind of stalled because he's like, you're open, but man, can I even throw it to you? Or do I have to wait for, one of my 1 or 2 trustworthy guys to get open? And that's a huge concern because Western Michigan, again, I'm not trying to knock them, but they're not a top 5 defensive backfield like Stanford is. I think just about everyone who ranks these sorts of things in the preseason has the Stanford secondary in their top 5 across the nation. And if their passing attack is just basically first look Deontay Burnett, second look Bale, they're going to get swallowed up by Stanford secondary pretty quickly. And then, it's going to be very tough. No matter how good Ronald Jones or Stephen Carr or any of these running backs are, it's going to be very tough to go one-dimensional against Stanford. Even if Stanford's linebackers or whoever don't live up to expectations, and they're pretty lofty for that group this year.
Yep.
It's going to be very tough. So someone's got to get open and do some work out of that receiving core. And on defense, USC they've got to take away the running lanes for Bryce Love. They can't get him a lot of breathing room. They don't do those 2 things. Stanford's just going to slowly suffocate him.
Yeah,
it's going to be
There's no question that's going to be the game plan. Shaw's going to try to take the air out of the ball. He's going to try to run a lot and mix in just enough play action pass to keep the front, soft a little bit. To me, though, this game totally is going to come down to the USC offensive line against the Stanford front 7. Can Lance Anderson and his defensive staff get pressure, using, that kind of retooled defensive line absent Solly Thomas. Now, Harrison Phillips looked great in Australia. That's a big plus. And the ends played adequately. And as you said, the linebacking core is notorious. They're great. Expect all kinds of exotic things with Peter Kalambai. Expect to see him basically playing a 4-3 defensive line on linemen on obvious passing downs. The question's going to be, can the USC's offensive line keep those guys blocked and keep Darnold clean? And if so, SC's going to have a good day. And if not, it's going to be painful on offense.
And what I'm interested in seeing is because of that solid secondary for the Stanford defense, the front 7, they love to bring the pressure. So if they have confidence that if the ball gets in the air and it's a 50-50 ball, they've got to like their chances there. Are they going to just start bringing tons of heat and just bring the house every time and go straight up like Pittsburgh Steelers on it?
Yeah.
That could get interesting because, 7 against 5 is usually not good for the 5. And when all 7's hitting you right in the face, when that particular 7 in particular, that could get ugly pretty quickly. So I think they're going to hopefully try some different things to get the ball into the air and get some catches. Everyone wants to look at the quarterback. We tend to do that for better or for worse and say, oh, and in fairness, Sam Darnold's expectations were so high that if he didn't win the national championship like from the first pass, that it was just so good. They're just like, we'll cancel the season.
Yeah,
it's over. Like if he didn't do that right out of the gate, people would have been like, oh well, he's overrated.
Yeah, he was in the ultimate no-win position last week.
Which is exactly why I think he can't win the Heisman, because the best he can do is live up to expectations. But this wasn't the case. Like his numbers were not good, and a lot of that is just because he had basically one guy he could throw to, and if you took him away, it was like Cody Kessler and Juju Smith-Schuster from 2 years ago all over again. It was just sort of like, one read and then bail, and that was it. And it can't devolve into that, but it also, you can't keep throwing to guys who are just going to drop it.
Fair point.
So someone's going to have to step up. There's a lot of young talent there, but man, and it was a lot of these guys are, 19, 20. It was their first game, probably their first time off the practice squad. So, but it's a big step up now from game 1 to game 2. Western Michigan was Western Michigan, but now you got some dangerous DBs back there, and you're going to have to, not a lot of margin for error against that group.
Yeah, fair enough. But I still think it's going to be a completely different demeanor and attitude. These kids from SC are playing a bunch of guys that they've been battling against or maybe played with in high school from Southern California. Intense recruiting battles for that part of that state between these two squads. These guys know each other. They've played each other. They may not like each other. The schools have developed quite a salty rivalry going back to, the biggest upset ever and the what's your deal game. All of that stuff seems to still be carrying over. So I expect there to be a little bit of nastiness, a little bit of attitude and saltiness. And honestly, I think this is a pick'em game. When I wrote my Stanford schedule preview, I've got the card looking really, really good this year. But when I wrote it a couple of weeks back, I had Stanford losing this game. As a matter of fact, the only game I had Stanford losing. And we'll see if it plays out that way. I think this is more or less going to be a pick'em contest. I think it's going to go down to the final possession. It's going to be a field goal one way or another. These teams just find a way to always play each other really, really tough, irrespective of who's ranked where. It seems not to matter. Seems not to matter which stadium they're in, home or away. I think the home field advantage is negligible in this particular series. I expect a fantastic football game Saturday night, and honestly, I think it's as close to a 50-50 game as you could see this early in the season between two teams both ranked in the top 15.
Yeah, last year was kind of an anomaly because it was what was it, 17 point?
27 to 10. That one got away from SC, but they were, they figured out that week they were playing the wrong quarterback.
Yeah, a lot of things got away from SC that first month last year, but we're moving on. We're not bringing that up again.
Stanford got a little lucky in that regard.
But USC didn't know they were playing Pitt's quarterback against
Exactly.
Allegedly, Clay Helton has no regrets about starting the quarterback he started.
Clay Helton is a liar if he said that out loud.
Well, coaches speak as coaches speak. What can you do, I guess? But I think you're right. These teams always play each other tight. Just no matter what, even when one team is a 40-point favorite, 41, who's counting? It's just sort of the way it happens. But that also concerns me because USC's field goal kickers had a dreadful camp. The guy that hit the game winner in the Rose Bowl, he's no longer on the team. The two guys competing to replace him, just they like every day in camp they'd go like 3 for 9, 3 for 7. And if the thing comes down to, if it's like 2014 where it's just like someone's got to hit a 45-yarder for USC to win, I'm not super confident USC is going to make that happen. And so it's got to the point actually where during fall camp, one of the press conferences, they were talking to Clay Helton, and he was like, your kickers look bad again today. And, is that going to change how you play call? And he didn't hedge or do coach speak or say, we'll have to figure it out. He just flat out said, yes, we're absolutely changing the way we're going to do play calling inside the 40. It was just like, whoa, okay.
That says a lot if he said he didn't regret his quarterback choice.
Yeah. Also concerning was last year in the red zone, the red zone offense was not particularly good. Yeah. So that has the potential to leave a lot of points on the board. If you aren't very good inside the 35 and now you might not have a good field goal kicker, and you're going into a game that historically just always seems to be very tight. Hopefully one of those things is not true for USC in this game, but there's some concerns there for sure. And they didn't try any field goals really against Western Michigan. And so We don't really know how well that kicker is going to do in game, but if you're not hitting him in practice, I can't imagine like going out in front of 80,000 people and doing it is magically going to make you better. I don't know, maybe it will, but it doesn't seem like it will.
Well,
hey guys,
call that one advantage Stanford, because Jet Toner with 8 for 8 on PATs and 2 for 2 in field goals. So
oh man,
he has looked great as the replacement to Conrad Ukopina.
And he's just got a cool name. Let's just be honest.
He's got the best name ever. Man, I wish my mom had named me Jet. I would be so much happier.
You're supposed to be playing wide receiver, though, if you've got that name.
Fair point.
So guys, you know me. I want to know the players. I want to know the rosters. I want to know the depth charts. And for the people out there that watch the big games, and so they're going to check out USC and Stanford 3 or 4 times each every season. Who are those players, whether they be X factors, however you want to interpret the question, whether they're X factors or whether they're guys that are exceptional, potentially all conference players, but we just haven't heard about them yet.
Good
Don, who should we look out for aside from the obvious stars for the Stanford Cardinal?
So here's what was fascinating about that game, almost 2 weeks ago now in Sydney. David Shaw is notorious for redshirting very talented players. This season, he's playing everybody. If that tells me he feels really good about this team and thinks they have a chance to be special, because he's taking all these talented true freshmen that he's brought in and he is getting them on the field, early. So, both of the tackles that we've talked about, Walker and Sorrell, both played in ogre packages. Expect to see them play a role in short yardage situations. Connor Weddington had a couple of fantastic catches as a true freshman. The speedster from Washington didn't know if he was going to be a running back or a wide receiver. Seems to be playing out of the slot. And the true freshman tight end, Colby Parkinson, 6'7", caught a fade in the end zone for a touchdown, caught another one streaking down the sideline to open the game. His first catch ever in a Stanford uniform, went for a touchdown from Keller Crisp. These freshmen are difference makers, and they're not being held back. It's kind of unusual, but it also says that A, they're good, and B, this is kind of a go for broke approach. It tells me a lot, given what I've seen from Coach Shaw in each of his first 6 seasons so far. There's some freshmen who are going to play a lot this season, and they're going to make a difference. And in fact, it looks like they already have. So good for them, and that's highly encouraging for Cardinal fans.
To underscore Don's point, just real quick, understand David Shaw is the guy that let Christian McCaffrey as a freshman get like a handful of touches his freshman season. And
he redshirted Andrew Luck.
Yeah, and redshirted Andrew Luck. And so to see him bringing in these guys, it's just like, whoa. If you're getting David Shaw to move off of his sort of tried and true methods, you're doing something pretty impressive. But as far as USC goes, the Ronald Jones. You obviously have heard plenty about Sam Darnold. They had a freshman come in, a running back by the name of Stephen Carr, who he got some extra touches, and he broke off some pretty nice runs.
He looked great.
Yeah, I was pretty impressed. Their running backs are deep on that USC team. They got a lot of talent back there. So for him to come in as a freshman and sort of cut through, probably 3 or 4 guys that probably would have been in front of them just in terms of experience, and they were 4- and 5-star recruits coming in too, and he came right out and he just took that spot. It's kind of impressive. So he could really do some explosive things. Ronald Jones is still going to get the bulk of the carries, but never discount the possibility that Stephen Carr can just break out a 50-yarder at any point. And then I really like Jack Jones out of the defensive backfield. He everyone was talking about, how to replace Adoree Jackson, and no one guy is going to replace everything Adoree Jackson did, but he kind of came out and looked pretty impressive. The entire most of the defensive backs for USC, I think, look pretty impressive. So I like Jack Jones on defense, and I like Stephen Carr on offense as sort of the names you might not have heard of. And then hopefully, fingers crossed, since we're doing the all-star name team here, the Imator Bebe brothers.
Yeah.
That
is a good name. That is a really good name.
Daniel Josh,
really good
a tight end, one's a wide receiver. I think they're a freshman and sophomore. They're eventually going to be very talented, and I can't wait for that when all of the big-time ESPN national announcers have to like fumble over these guys' names. But I'm hoping they have breakout seasons. They should, but actually right now I'm just hoping anyone out of that young wide receiver core has a breakout season. But I'm hoping it's one of the Imator Bebe brothers for sure. But definitely look at Jack Jones and Stephen Carr.
Stanford, USC at the Coliseum, the first big step for each one of these programs in reaching their goal of making it to the Pac-12 championship game, and it may just be the first edition we see between these two schools this year. One, of course, USC with the tradition and the brand names, but Stanford has owned the series, totally owned the series in recent years. What, Donald? 5 straight?
4 straight.
4 straight, looking for 5.
11 out of the last 14, maybe.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Yeah,
that sounds about right. It's probably not quite that high because Stanford was pretty down in 2005, 2006. So, 2007 was the 41-point upset. So, yeah. Since then, though, it's been really interesting.
A lot to not a lot is the takeaway there.
Yeah.
Don King from Last Word on College Football and Nick Dempsey join him at Conquest Chronicles, SB Nation platform for USC, and also Saturdays with Nick. All right, Don, looking at the first weekend of college football, a lot of crazy happenings, as is usual. We go through it each and every year. What caught your eye?
A couple of things. Despite the lack of success, love Paul Johnson going for 2 to try to end that overtime game for Georgia Tech. Love it. They hadn't stopped his QB all night. His defense was clearly wearing down. I love him trying to go ahead and win the game outright, even though it didn't work out. Gutsy call, Coach Johnson, right call. Good job. And gutsy comeback and great effort by Tennessee, too. So good for them. Secondly, a lot of struggles around the nation with teams that you thought were going to be really good and just go out and put people away, and they didn't. A couple of them wound up upside down, like Texas at home against Maryland. And, some folks just didn't look like we thought they were gonna, which is always kind of fascinating. It happens every year, week 1. You always see some weird things like that. And third, I'm really glad I'm me and not Kevin Sumlin this week. This is probably the first time I've ever been able to say that. But right now, I'm glad I'm me and not him.
Yeah, I'm with you there. I thought there was a couple of surprising teams. I think Texas and Maryland was crazy. UCLA, I don't know if you guys know this, but they kind of had a pulse for a little bit there in that game, and that was neat to see. It's better than watching them, drudge their way through another 3-9 boringness with no running game. Plus, I hate to say this is sacrilege from my neck of the Pac-12 woods, but that fake spike was pretty cool.
Even though the clock was dead.
Yeah, they got away with one, but come on.
They went for the okie doke. They were watching the quarterback. He made it work. Good for him.
I was also, this is again probably not the sexiest pick in the world, but that particularly in the first half, that Indiana quarterback. I don't know if you guys watched that. Well, Mark, you probably did, but that Indiana quarterback was throwing some sharp footballs. I know everyone said, OSU's defensive backs are going to struggle. And in fairness, 3 of the first 21 guys in the NFL draft all came from that backfield. So, yeah, they were going to be worse. But a lot of those passes, they did exactly what they needed to do, and they were just too perfect to miss. So that kid, I don't know why they started bringing in a running quarterback, but that Indiana quarterback was throwing some sharp footballs for sure.
Yeah. Love that he wears a number in the 20s, too. Real cool. A la John Hadel back in the day.
That is John Hadel.
Awesome.
I felt terrible for the Florida State quarterback.
Yeah.
Oh, man, like that's rough. I honestly that game went about as I expected it. Obviously not the injuries, but Florida once again appears to not have an offense like at all. So that's less than interesting, but not
when
unpredictable.
You score all your points on pick sixes, that's not good.
Yeah. I'm trying to think who else really jumped out at me. I think those were the big ones. I honestly, all the big games coming up this weekend, I'm kind of low key most excited about Boise State versus Washington State because
the line on that one is nuts. He was favored by like 10 or 11, and I'm like, you got to be kidding me.
You know what? I wish you could just put a bet down on like what's going to be the nuttiest game of this week, because I would probably take like $1,000 right now and just be like, give me Mike Leach. Mike Leach and Boise State, let's do it. But
the Pirates,
let's UCLA looking sharp. A lot of teams look flat early. Washington did not look great first half against Rutgers. Wisconsin did not look great first half against Utah State. Utah didn't look particularly sharp out of the gate. They all picked it up and eventually went on to pretty big wins, but a lot of teams just not necessarily a hot start, but they got it together. So I'm interested to see what happens with some of those teams going forward. But and I too love that Paul Johnson. Your bread and butter is you run the option. That's that you're going to live and die with that. So you might as well go with your best shot right now. Would have been nice if someone did a little more blocking on that play, but yeah, all around, this was a fantastic opening weekend of college football, and I love that I can watch countless hours of the sport, and it still just continues to find ways to surprise and impress me.
Amen.
So aside from Oregon State in what was week 0, I guess we would call it, 2 weeks ago when a handful of teams played, Oregon State losing to Colorado State 58-37, the Pac-12 was undefeated.
Went 11-0. That's right.
Not a whole lot of huge wins, but of course, highlighted by UCLA knocking off a mid-tier SEC team. But this weekend, so undefeated outside of the Oregon State loss. Big weekend across the nation for the Power Fives, of course. But for the Pac-12 in particular, a lot of very under-the-radar games outside of the conference, but could prove very difficult group of 5 type opponents. So Oregon hosts Nebraska. You've got that game. Utah at BYU. Boise State at Washington State, as you guys mentioned. Minnesota goes to Oregon State. Arizona State's got a difficult game with San Diego State at home. Arizona takes on Houston. So some tricky games for the lower tier of the Pac-12 and trying to hold up conference pride against the group of 5.
Yeah, not gonna be undefeated this week. That's for sure. Because of USC and Stanford playing each other, but not going to be undefeated outside of the conference either. There are some folks who are going to get tripped up there. Those are some great contests though, and we're going to learn a lot about the conference in week 2. What does it look like? What's the pecking order going to be? And who actually has a chance to make some noise? It's going to be fascinating.
Yeah, and also I'm interested to see if some of the teams we're expecting to be the bottom dwellers can kind of elevate themselves. Because right now the Arizona schools are not looking exciting. And so would you say they have Houston and San Diego State? That could be 0-2 for the conference right there.
Totally agree. I don't expect either of those teams to win.
Yeah, PJ Fleck and Minnesota coming out to Oregon State. That's just an interesting matchup. Just in general, it's like the tier C squad Rose Bowl game.
That's a return trip from last year.
Gary Anderson's got to be a little thankful for Kevin Sumlin, because Oregon State didn't do much in week 1, but they were abysmal in week 0. So, Sumlin took a little bit of the heat off of him because man, they look bad.
Nebraska and Oregon is just that feels like it could be a wild one because you're just not really sure what either of those teams are.
I got to tell you, the Ducks look good though. I was hoping Taggart couldn't pull them back together that quickly. They look terrific.
So that's another home return trip from Nebraska, where Oregon went for, was it 7 2-point plays and missed them all last year, or they would have won at Nebraska.
Yep.
So that was the first nail in the coffin for Mark Helfrich.
Yeah, probably ended his run. Good call.
Well, that and literally everything the Oregon defense did for like the previous 2 years.
Or didn't do.
Yeah, well. But yeah, this is going to be an interesting week, and then once we get into like full blown conference play, we're going to get some Friday night games and Pac-12 after dark starting up again, and it's going to get weird out west, and it's going to be fantastic.
I think this is going to be a really good season. Yeah, watch out for Oregon. The Holy War probably is going to be really good. I'm not sure either of those teams is as talented as usual, but BYU has heart, as it always does. They got thumped down in the swamp, but they're going to show up for this one, and they'll be sky high. And this is another one of those throw out the records, throw out the rosters. You know, I get it's laundry playing laundry, but man, those games, folks east of the Mississippi just do not understand how intense that rivalry is.
Yeah, that's very true. And it's weird having like an intense rivalry week 2. Like, could you imagine, not that I'm comparing them on the scale or scope, but like, could you imagine if Alabama played Auburn in September? Like, it would just be weird. But week 2 out of conference, like, you're right. That's a very passionate and emotional rivalry game. And that thing could be a nail biter. One team could come out and just clobber the other one.
Yep. It could go lots of different directions.
Yeah, that thing can get pretty intense pretty quickly. And it's in terms of its intensity in September, if you want a little taste of rivalry week from Thanksgiving, you do well to watch that game if you can find it on TV.
Great.
I'm not necessarily asking you guys to stick around for another 45 minutes after I read you this list, but this is based. So I have dedicated myself to 3 videos each week. Well, you guys know that I shoot more like 58 times that, but I've dedicated myself to my top 25 every week.
Yep.
After the games, which means I'm looking solely at track record. I'm not looking at what I project to happen. Therefore, Maryland is number 15 this week. Do I think they're the 15th best team in the country? No way. But based on what they did this past week, there's only one game in the books. I have them at number 15. I expect them to plummet. So my other promises to my viewers each week is my predictions, of course, and then also that I'm going to rate the conferences each and every week and update it week to week. So this is what I have after 1 week of play. And then if you have any questions, I will justify my selections. But again, this isn't based on the rankings of how strong I think these conferences are. I'm merely going by interpreting the results on the field. So we only have one game in the books for everyone. The Big 12 at number 5, the ACC at number 4, the Pac-12 at 3, the SEC at 2, and the Big 10 at 1.
I have a hard time arguing that.
Yeah.
I had to tell you, man, the Big 10 East is stacked. Michigan was awfully impressive. I was worried about them coming in, but they look great. Ohio State is really, really, really good. And in the last word on Sports Top 25, I had Penn State at number 4 last week. That is a really good football team. You know, take your pick. You like McSorley or you like Saquon Barkley? I could argue for either of them as the best player in the country this year. And right now, I think Barkley is as good as anybody. If I could start a college team this season with one player, he'd probably be the guy. I have a hard time arguing that. Wisconsin did struggle early, but they're going to be okay. So there's going to be some strength in the Big Ten West, but the Big Ten East is just loaded.
Now, again, just to clarify, that doesn't mean I believe that the Big Ten is the best conference top to bottom. I just believe that they played the best football in week 1. Only 2 losses, and consider these 2 losses. Rutgers at home against Washington, so you're taking the worst team in the Big Ten, losing only a very respectable game against what's possibly the best team in the Pac-12 and the college football playoff participant from last year, and Purdue, most likely the second worst team in the Big Ten, losing late against Louisville, a top 15 team.
Yeah, I'm with you. Yeah, I'm not going to argue your order, particularly based on results to date.
And one TV note for a particular TV network that will remain nameless because I want to protect my employment. Just want to clue them into one thing. When they're making comparisons between conferences, you don't include the Ohio State-Indiana game as one win and one loss for the Big Ten when you're comparing them against the other leagues. No, you put up the record of the games against each other.
Good point.
Because they can't win both of those, just like USC and Stanford this week.
Good point.
Somebody has to lose. Anyway, I
Amen.
saw a winning percentage comparison, and they were including the Ohio State-Indiana game as a loss for the Big Ten and a win for the Big Ten.
That's funny. Yeah, that's a miss. You got to be able to send a memo to somebody about that, Mark. Please straighten that out.
Oh, I've done it in the past, believe me.
I do believe you.
Donald King from Last Word on College Football. Nick Dempsey, you can join him on Conquest Chronicles covering USC football for SB Nation, and also Saturdays with Nick. All right, gentlemen, I knew this was going to be a great discussion. It exceeded expectations, so I appreciate the time.
Thanks, Mark. Always
Of course,
fun.
Mark. Yeah, had a blast anytime.